This podcast is brought to you by Penji. Penji is a creative subscription service that gives you access to pre-vetted, agency-trained creatives from all over the world. From graphic design to illustrations to social media management and web development, it's all included for one monthly price. It's time to say goodbye to the hassle of searching for top-notch creative talent. With Penji, you get quality and consistency delivered right to your inbox every day, carefully crafted for you by humans. So meet your new creative team today. Head over to penji.co for more and enter the coupon code located within the podcast show notes.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the First 100 podcast. This is where we explore the journey of entrepreneurs, business owners, and agency leaders as they share the strategies and challenges, triumphs that led them to secure those first 100 customers. I'm your host, Daniela, and I'm Penji's partnership coordinator. Today, I'm joined here with a very special guest, Meghan Walker. Hi, Meghan. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. Very exciting. So, for anybody who wants to know a little bit more about you or doesn't know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. I am a former physician and lifelong entrepreneur. And I would consider myself at this point of my career entirely unemployable. And that's because I've really sort of leveraged entrepreneur and my my passion for disseminating health en masse. I've really leveraged that to build a series of businesses that give me time freedom and financial freedom, but also the capacity to have a ton of impact in the world. So I love to jam out on strategy for building businesses that have impact in the world, businesses that can simultaneously give you access to the life and lifestyle that you are interested in building. But for me, I think that at this point in history, in 2024, we are at a point where entrepreneurship isn't just something for some people. It's a skill that people need to have in their back pocket. It's a life skill that gives more people than ever anticipated a sense of freedom, and that really encompasses so much of my life's work now.
Yeah, I think I was, reading up on your journey, and it was really interesting how you started as a physician and then moved to transitioned over to entrepreneurship. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I think that's very, unique. Most doctors or therapists, that kind of like, people who stay within that sort of like health and mental health and that medical side tend to stay within that realm and not do such a big 180 transition like you did.
Yeah. Well, I will say that I was an entrepreneur even before I went into medicine. And I had, long story short, I had a summer job and I got fired from that summer job like 10 days in. And so I was like, oh, this isn't boding well. And my parents were super clear, like, you just can't sit on the dock all summer and do nothing. Like you've gotta be constructive with your time. And that was the first moment where I went, okay, what two things have to be true at the same time so that I can sit on the dock all summer long and I am still working and making some money. And as I sat there, my parents looked at me, they're like, "Good luck with that." And I said, "I'm gonna figure this out." And I looked out at the lake and I was looking out at all these little the cottages on the island. And I went, "I bet people who are spending their summers at the cottage are working really hard to be able to access their cabins or cottages, whatever your vernacular is, in the summer. I bet they would love it if they were clean for them when they showed up." And so got in my little tin boat and made this little flyer and stuck it on people's docks and like a plastic sheet with a rock on it. And I advertised my cottage cleaning business. And 2 weeks later, I had a full roster of clients. And for the next summer, I had so many clients on the islands because they could never find people who could clean their place. I had so many people who wanted to have their cottage cleaned for them that I hired 11 of my friends. And I would take them all out to all the cottages. They'd clean for the day and I'd go pick them all up and bring them home and they could drive home. And I smugly sat on the dock and kind of stared down my parents. And I really like knew in the core of my being, I was like, I don't know what I'm actually going to be when I grow up, but it will always be through this vehicle of entrepreneurship. And so when when I was debating what I wanted to study and where I wanted to go, I was introduced to something called naturopathic medicine, which is just like looking at the root cause. And I couldn't shake it. It was so incredible. But one of the things I loved about it was naturopathic medicine, like physiotherapy, like chiropractic, like most medical doctors in the United States, if you are not in a hospital setting, you actually are required, not by law, but by business model to actually deploy your skill set as an entrepreneur. And so it was one of the things that scares most people away from wanting to study naturopathic medicine or chiropractic or any of these things. But for me, it was like the win. I was like, oh wow, I get to study this system of medicine. I get to help people. I get to work with patients, and I get to do it through this vehicle of entrepreneurship. And I didn't realize at that point in my career that I was a complete weirdo in loving and being intrigued by entrepreneurship. But that was sort of my foray, was really like beforehand realizing the power of this vehicle and way of thinking to be able to make a living. And then I was just fortunate enough that my career enabled me to kind of carry that forward.
That's incredible. That's like a very sort of synergy type of situation, where like you can just put together what you love and create something out of it. How then has that journey of, you know, being a naturopath? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Naturopathic. Yeah.
Naturopathic, sorry. Natural
Yeah.
doctor shaped your approach to entrepreneurship and leadership and, business and all of this? Because I assume that once you started to practice, it changed
Sure.
a little bit.
Yeah, it did. And at its core, the power of naturopathic medicine is that what we're really looking to do with our patients is understand what is the root cause of what is going on. So and this isn't to say that traditional medicine or allopathic medicine is wrong. We just have different roles in the system of healing. And so where, you may have an ear infection that is taking you down, and you go to your doctor and you're like, I need antibiotics. And you probably do need antibiotics for your ear infection. For me as a naturopathic doctor, what I'm really curious about is why you've had 4 ear infections in the last year and a history of strep throat. What's actually going on in the complex system of your body that is predisposing this risk for you? So awesome that we can go and access antibiotics when we need to. And also, what could you be doing in your or lifestyle? What kind of genetic pathways or SNPs, or like what's going on in your health that is predisposing you to this risk? And so the root cause enables us to like take a step back and like really understand the crux of the problem within the context of a complex system. So anytime you have a complex system, the reality is there's going to be more than one way that we reach a solution. And if we're mindful of the fact we have to go back to the root cause of it, we have lots of strategy that we can bring to solving the problem. The cool thing about entrepreneurship and business is it's no different. So, how you want to start a business, how I want to start a business, how Sally over here is going to want to start a business to solve a problem is going to probably have some nuanced difference driven by our experience, by our education, by our background. But we're still going to have to like stick to some core tenets. You can't run around making up medicine, and you can't run around breaking the laws of economics. But the creative side around how we get to that solution, how we create buy-in for a customer, how we create buy-in for a patient to want to actually change their lifestyle. It's way harder for me to get you to take out dairy and gluten and take some supplements and meditate and manage your stress than it is for you to take an antibiotic every 4 weeks. And so it's really no different than when we're looking at a business. How do we create buy-in? How do we approach this complex system? And how do we solve for a few different solutions in a problem at once? And back to this original idea of, I sat on the dock and I'm like, how do I sit here and make money at the same time? I have two variables that I want to have be equal on either side of this equation. It's like grade 9 chemistry. And so I think that there's a real opportunity within entrepreneurship to do that as well. And this is one of the things I talk about so often, is that we lose sight of balance. We keep talking, I want balance as an entrepreneur. I want balance as an entrepreneur. But then we don't build that into the equation. It's literally the equation of balance. And what has to happen is you have to say, here's the business I want to have. Here's the impact I want to have. Here's the income I want to have. Here are all the things I want to have be true. And I want that equation to be balanced with Fridays off and time with my kids and blah, 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 and an exit on the other end. And that allows us to engineer a system and a product and a business that satisfies both sides of these things. And so for me, the way my would approach addressing the root cause of someone's health is actually no different than how my brain approaches constructing a business that works in alignment with the outcome that we're trying to get to.
That's really interesting because I think balance is really difficult to achieve, especially when you're sort of growing a business because you are as a business owner, I think I've spoken to a lot of people who agree with me. You're kind of everything, right? You're the marketing team, you're the finance team, you're the social media team, you're human resources, and you're with product and whatever it is that customer service. I mean, it's just like every department that is coming up to my mind. Especially because people don't necessarily have like a lot of budget. And it can be very overwhelming to sort of have all of that in one plate and then still be able to say like, "Yeah, I wouldn't have Fridays with my kids," or like, "I wanna be able to not be working at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday and be able to clock out at 7," or whatever that goal is. How have you been helping people manage that? Especially with a business of their own. I think that's kinda like for me, at least, that's where the line is difficult to draw because if it's a job that you're working, at the end of the day, it's not your company, right? It's easier to draw that line because you can say, "Well, I'm getting paid to do this. I come here, I clock out, and I get paid."
Yeah, here's my boundary.
Yeah,
Yes.
here's my boundary, but if it's your thing, it's you've invested in this, it's your baby, right? Like, in a way, it's like, I want this business to grow, and my stocks are gonna go down, and, like, my investment is gonna suffer, and my credit and all of this. You're a lot more inclined to be, like, overworking all the time.
Yeah, and so listen, I have two thoughts on this. So the first is I've got three thoughts. The first is I think we have to like reorient our relationship with the word balance. Like what does what does that actually even mean? Does that mean that you are able to preserve your health? Is that just a feeling of like peace that you're looking for in yourself? Is that a lack of resentment towards your work? Or is it clocking out at 9 o'clock? Like I actually think we use the word balance, but what we really are trying to manage is a whole bunch of feelings that we have, and I think we need real clarity on those feelings. And sometimes you have to be in it before you're like, oh, I'm way out of balance, right? Like we have these entrepreneurs, it's so classic, right? We have these big, lofty ideas and all this dopamine flooding through our system. And then we're, 4 months into it and we're like, I am so overworked. Because we don't have all that neurochemistry driving that excitement anymore. We don't have our physiology having our back. And now we just are sitting in a pool of resentment. So I think we actually have to be really clear on a moment to moment basis what the heck balance means. Not just for you as a person in this massively esoteric way, but actually in where you're at in your life. So I've got three kids under the age of 12, and they're all in highly competitive sports, and they're all at different schools. And it is a gong show come 4 o'clock. How I find balance and my expectations around balance right now are so different than when I had just graduated from med school and really was only responsible to myself. So one, there's an evolution of what that means, and I think that we have to approach this conversation with a level of maturity and personal insight around how we want to define what balance is. What feelings do we have to mitigate against? Once we have that clarity, back to our equation piece, I think there's two other things that have to come into place. One, we have to manage our own expectations. So again, we are really excited at the beginning and we're all in on these pieces. And then we've got dopamine flooding our system. Dopamine is a super powerful neurochemical agent that gets you very excited to do big, lofty things. And I think it's powerful and I love dopamine. The challenge is that once we get into the dip of the work, we do not have dopamine on a daily basis and it feels stressful. And we move from dopamine driving our decision making to cortisol driving our stress hormone pathways. And that does not feel as nice. And so we're doing the same work we did over here, driven by dopamine. Now we've got all this cortisol running through our system. We're like, oh, I'm so out of balance. But you're working just as hard as you were 4 months ago. It's just you've changed your relationship, you've changed the feeling that you get from your work. One way to hack against this, and this is my third point on it, is that when we have clarity and purpose on our work, when we're like, this is the impact that I want to have in the world, this is why we're doing it. What we can actually do is we can hack the system. We can draw more dopamine on an ongoing basis, which sounds like such a random fleeting thing, but like we chase dopamine all the time. We chase dopamine with likes on our social media. We chase dopamine by watching Netflix at night. We chase dopamine by being like, oh, I want to have a glass of wine or get together with friends in the evening. These are all things that drive like micro occurrences of dopamine. So I'm really interested in how we get it back into our work. And one of the hacks to do that is to have ruthless clarity on the purpose of your work, the impact of your work, because it allows us to like galvanize from our solar plexus a different sense of meaning around the working until 9 o'clock, the getting up at 5:30 in the morning. It doesn't feel like it is out of balance anymore. It feels like it's actually for something else. And this is why I say we have to get really clear on the feeling that we're after, because we can actually manipulate that system. When we have a clarity around purpose, what happens is we also blunt that cortisol curve. So our body literally is not in the same stress response as when we're just working till 9 o'clock for the man. So when we talk about needing to have balance, I actually think it's a complex question. I think it's more than just boundaries, but I also think if we really want to lean into it, there's work that we can do to achieve it way faster and way more intelligently than we find on most Forbes articles or like online business forums. There's like some real partnership that can happen between your physiology, your boundaries, your mindset, and your expectations with respect to your work.
Yeah. Can you actually tell us of a story of a person that you had that you've been able to help out with this or that, a real life case if you can? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I probably have a million of them, and I can't use anybody's names because when I was in practice and seeing patients, and I sold my practice about 5 years ago. My primary audience that I worked with were entrepreneurs, and so one of the things I found so fascinating, I was thinking about this morning about the entrepreneurs who came through my door, is they don't look like the entrepreneurs on Instagram. They're not driving around like and I'm talking entrepreneurs who have businesses that are making tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a year. They're not driving around in like fancy cars. They're not wearing like fur coats and chinking like champagne glasses alternate. They're working and they're putting their head down and they're really like moving through this stuff. And I remember I had one person in particular, and she came into my business. She had a tech company, and she was in her late 20s, and I felt like she crawled through my door. And she was in the middle of a funding round, and she's like, "Listen, my last naturopathic doctor fired me. She said my work is killing me." Um, and she's like, "I need your help. I heard that you could help me." I was like the witch doctor for entrepreneurs. And I said to her, "Yeah, tell me a little bit more about what it is that you're doing." And she was sharing with me what it is that she's doing. And she got into like the long hours and the endless this and the sources of stress. And I was like, okay, like let's just shelve all that for a second. I want to understand the work that you're doing. And the work that they were doing, the platform they were building, was, integrating software, and it was integrating women's health. And she's like, if we can get this to work, like hundreds of millions of women are going to be able to access this other side of healthcare. And the second we were able to start to talk about that and tap into that, her whole body started to shift. She reconnected to the people and the faces and the women whose lives were going to change as a result of her work. And that did not completely solve her issue with respect to stress. But what it did do is it gave us a gateway to be able to talk about some of the other things that we could put in place to offset the impact of the long hours, of the funding round, of managing the cash flow, of having 100 employees all of a sudden, all of these different pieces. And then they went on to close their Series A round of like $10 million, and all of the things worked out for her. But one of the things that I made her promise me was I said, listen, I will make it my mission to keep you alive and thriving for the next 6 months as you get through this critical funding round. She was bearing the responsibility of like 100 employees and what their software could do. We can't ignore the fact that that's actually a lot on someone's shoulders. And I said, I'll keep you alive and thriving in that time. But when that 6 months is over, you owe me 6 months of recovery. You need to put different boundaries in place. You need to change that workflow. And I think that's one of the things that we need to recognize is that entrepreneurship is a marathon. we are not going to get the outcome. There's little hacks we can do and little tricks and softwares and all these things that can help us out, but it is a marathon. And if you sprint at the beginning of your marathon, you are going to burn out. And so you're going to have phases where you have to run faster, but you can't run fast through those phases if you don't also acknowledge and provision for the fact that there are times where you're going to have to slow down and have different boundaries in place. So this was something we talked about. It was something we talked about an awful lot. And she's a really great example of a success story of how we put all of these pieces into place together.
That's incredible. Yeah, I think in general, I've always been sort of amazed by business owners, and I see how much of the work they have, and I'm just like, how do you even manage to think that much? I like, how do you have so many things on your head? Because I have like, there's my job and there's my tasks and there's things that I have to do, and then I'm like, how am I supposed to also think about a million other things that are going on when I can barely like, I feel overworked sometimes just because there's a lot of work, like, it's not even a thing of, like, a specific situation, it's just, like, sometimes your job is busier than others, and I feel like I couldn't possibly live like that on a daily basis, so I really do admire people that are doing that 24/7, you know?
Yeah, but they can't do it 24/7 for like 10 years.
Yeah,
Right? And
for
and I
sure.
think that's one of the things that when we start to go, "Okay, how do we do this strategically?" We need to understand that once we get through that initial excitement phase, you have to provision for the marathon. You've gotta have gel packs in your pocket, and you've gotta make sure you're sleeping, and you've gotta you actually have to make sure that your body has your back so that you are maximizing your capacity for resilience as you move mental resilience, physiological resilience. Like resilience is what's going to move you through that marathon. And you are going to have times where you have more work than you can get done. And that's life. And part of it is going to be, okay, well, how do we communicate your needs around that when you're in the middle of it? What are you willing to let go of when that happens? Like what are the systems for you as a person? And I don't mean you, Daniela. I just mean like everybody. For me, like, okay, it's gonna be a gong show this week. I'm running a big event tomorrow. What are the systems I need to have prepped and ready to go so that I don't have all this other catastrophe hanging out around me, right? I need reinforcements to come in and help with my kids. I need someone else to pack their lunches. Because if I didn't plan for those things, like children would go unfed. Like it would just it the I it's way beyond my ability to cope and capacitate. And the things you plan for, those will help you out, but that leaves room for you to also manage the things you totally couldn't anticipate. And that's the stuff that usually puts people over the edge, right? Is it's the call at 4 o'clock or this happened or we suddenly have to move mountains. And if we're already overflowing everywhere, we have no ability to do that. And so I think sometimes we forget and we've almost been trained with respect to our health to wait until things are overflowing before we go and we seek help. And, I know we're talking about entrepreneurship and we can apply it to that as well. But for you as the leader in your business, you can no longer afford to wait until your health and your body is overflowing before you go and you seek help. So, entrepreneurs, and this is why I love working with them, are just so perfectly positioned to working with someone in a preventative capacity with respect to their health because it will increase their bandwidth of tolerance mentally, physically, what they're able to actually produce and create in the world will expand when they think of themselves as an asset in their business and they take care of themselves that way.
Yeah. Definitely, and I think we've learned a lot from you today, and I think, like, we talk a lot about business in this podcast, and we don't really talk about actually being able to balance that. I think we talk about, like, "Oh, these are marketing tips and growth tips and, like, scaling," and that's great, but I think, this angle of learning to care for your health, and you really can't give it your best if you're not at your best, like, bottom line. You're not gonna be a good business owner if you're exhausted, right?
It's funny because yes, and obviously I'm really bought in on this, but even sometimes I forget, right? Like when I'm really busy, one of the first things that I'm like, oh, I'm just too tired. I don't have time to go to the gym. And every single time I go and like hop on the Peloton or go for a run or I'm at the gym, I make a point of like sharing on social or telling my husband, I'm like, I just need someone else to know to remind me that my best ideas in my business and my most sound decision making as a leader happen on the backside of me exercising. Like the most critical thing I do as a leader in my business is make room to exercise. But when you're busy in all the other things, you tend to forget that. And so I do just I think that of all the tactics and strategies that I could talk about, and there's a ton of them we could talk about in terms of how we've grown our business and the impact that we have, actually caring for my health as the leader of my business has been the single most instrumental thing that have enabled us to grow multi seven-figure companies across multiple mediums. It's ensuring that I have the ability to stand and withstand everything that gets thrown my way.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's like a great lesson to take because it is true. And I do think that it's something that's very overlooked by most people because the focus tends to be on just the entrepreneurial side and the money side, you know? And for anybody who is looking to learn more from you, get coaching from you, where to find you, or, get more advice, I wanted to give you some space to tell us where to go and look for you.
Yeah, thank you. Our primary audience that we work around business building is in the healthcare space. So whether it's practitioners or people bringing consumer product goods to the table, and you can absolutely find more information about that on clinicianbusinesslabs.com. But I would say the best place to just like hang out with me and gain access to all of our resources is just to sort of follow along with the journey on Instagram. And my handle is just Dr. Meghan Walker. And I'm on stories and we post tactics and strategies and have lots of free resources there that people can access in terms of being able to build out and live this more balanced version of entrepreneurship.
Awesome. Yeah, I will be adding those links to the description of our video so that people that are watching can go and find you, and for people that are listening as well. It's been great having you, Megan. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody. I will see you guys on the next episode. Megan, thank you so much.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest, and to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend, and of course, subscribe.